Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you with us this week in America. Website thisweekinamerica.us. It's been called a riveting tale of an embattled America, sure to keep fans of political thrillers flipping through the pages. It's the highly anticipated The Cost of Liberty by Michael Skeen, a follow-up to the 2014 thriller The Cost of Freedom, the continuation of the story of President T.J. Samuels and his Chief of Staff, Don Ladner, as their administration struggles with perils that threaten the very existence of the United States, as Russia, China, Iran, and the Islamic Caliphate have joined forces and have launched an all-out attack on the U.S. and her allies. Author Michael Skeen served in the Air Force, spent some time in Vietnam, became interested in law enforcement, working 32 years as a policeman, 26 of those in O'Fallon, Missouri, where he rose through the ranks to become assistant chief of police before he retired. Michael became interested in politics and began researching many of the issues going on in the country and the world today. He began writing what-if scenarios regarding those events. His first novel, The Cost of Freedom, and his newest, The Cost of Liberty. Michael Skeen is with us on This Week in America. Michael, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, Rick. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
These books are both so exciting. I'll talk in a second about The Cost of Freedom, and just a little background there as we move into the new book, The Cost of Liberty. I mentioned you started doing a little research into some of these potential problems in the world and then developing the what-if scenarios. How did that develop into the book? And I'll say now, for those of you that haven't read the book, these are very believable circumstances that you're writing about here. How did this whole process begin for you?
Well, I retired from the police department, and I found out that I was a pretty lousy golfer. And when you live in a golfing community, you don't want to make a fool of yourself. So I decided to start. I listened to the radio, and I just heard all the pundits talking about, well, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And I thought, what if they really did? So I started looking into. It's amazing the research you can do on a computer nowadays. You can go on Google and find out so much stuff and websites. And so I started researching some of these things and thought, what if they really did happen? And I started writing a scenario. I've always enjoyed writing. I mean, for a long time, I wrote a lot of police reports, and there were some defense lawyers that thought some of those were fiction. But, we had, I got to where I started writing pretty well, and I started back in about 2008, 2009, writing The Cost of Freedom, and obviously I took my sweet time with that. And this one came a little bit faster, and I think it kind of hits the nail on the head with some of the things that people say may happen, and gives people an idea of what would occur if they really did happen.
Well, and that's the case. The first book, The Cost of Freedom, still available. The new book, The Cost of Liberty. Our guest on the program is Michael Skeen, the author. The book's available at Amazon.com. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on to get information on the book. You say in the beginning of the book, The Cost of Liberty, the book is fiction, but not science fiction. The weapons, the technology you talk about are all there. And that's what's scary, because you look through this and oftentimes you read a book's like, oh, there's no way that could happen. Here it's like, yeah, it could. And basically everything that could happen in a negative way towards the U.S. has happened. Now let's go back and pick up with the Cost of Freedom. As a country, we really face a lot of obstacles. Sort of give us a brief synopsis of that book.
In The Cost of Freedom, an insurance salesman from Mississippi and his sidekick, Don Ladner, they decide they've been messing with local politics. They decide that he's going to run for Congress, T.J. Samuels. And he gets elected and finds that the Congress really isn't interested in what's best for the country. They're interested in what's best for them and for their party. And so he decides to run for president so he can set some of that stuff straight. And as he runs as a Republican, but he runs on a populist Tea Party type ticket. And he gets a lot of support. Everybody chalks him off as not having a chance. This is starting to sound oddly familiar with the last election.
Yes.
And when he gets elected and takes office, neither side, Republicans or Democrats, want to work with him. And as he's trying to pull the sides together and trying to work with people in Congress to try to get some of his issues passed, suddenly terrorist attacks start forming from the oddest areas, and things start happening that obviously stuff has been boiling over for years. For instance, one thing is Hamas gets a hold of smallpox virus that was being stored by Russia, and they bring it over to Mexico and infect some illegal aliens that are coming into the United States illegally. They infect them with smallpox, a weaponized version of it, and they start a smallpox epidemic throughout the country. About the same time, China decides to call in our debt, and knowing that we don't have the funds to pay it, China decides that they want the West Coast deeded over to them from the United States. And it's just one thing after another, the things start happening, things that you don't really think would ever happen, but things that sometimes people say, what if it did? What if China did call our debt in? What if a group of aliens came across the border illegally and were infected with smallpox or some other disease? And all these things come just one block after another, just keep on falling down.
The new book is called The Cost of Liberty, and you've got these are the adversaries. You've got Russia, China, Iran, and the Islamic Caliphate. I mean, all of these are very active. We're concerned with all of them. And you put all four together that come out and strike out against us, you've got some very dire circumstances, don't you?
Yeah, at the very beginning of the book, the United States has just been attacked by Iran. And the attack was two freighters. Actually, there was three, and the United States caught one of them. But two freighters fire missiles from just offshore and explode nuclear devices over in the atmosphere over the United States. And these don't kill anybody from the explosion, but they cause what's called an electromagnetic pulse. And that disables and destroys the circuitry and electrical goods all across for hundreds and hundreds of miles. So imagine all of a sudden, no TV, no computers, no radio, no refrigeration. Hospitals don't have electricity to run the machines that keep people alive sometimes. No cars, no trucks, airplanes fall out of the sky because all the circuitry has been destroyed. We're all of a sudden back in the 1800s. People that don't know how to survive without electricity. It's amazing what electricity does. So the president is faced with a situation that most of everything east of the Rocky Mountains is in a dire strait, and they have to try to get aid to them. That's a lot of stuff to replace. And besides, the electric power lines all have to be replaced because they've been destroyed as well. So it leaves the country in dire shape, only to find that some of the aid ships coming in are offloading tanks that were American at one time, but now the Islamic Caliphate has their hands on them, as they were taken from Iran and Iraq when after battles and stuff. They refurbished them and brought them over here, and most of the troops they need for the invasion are already here. They came over as refugees and they came over as immigrants. So this is kind of a situation that people talk about now, but here it is in this book. It actually happens. And the United States very quickly winds up being invaded by the Islamic states.
Yeah, it's frightening as you read the book. The book is the Cost of Liberty, that the United States is actually fighting for the United States in the United States. It's a little bit sobering, and the scenario you lay out, although statistically probably, well, not real probable to happen, all is plausible. And when you piece it all together, it's like if everything went against us, this is exactly what we'd be facing. Do you ever scare yourself when you're writing this and go, wow, this actually could happen, and I got to stop and go to bed tonight and try to sleep?
No, I've had some people who have read my book and told me that, they put it down because it was getting a little scary. But, even though this stuff is all fiction and it's all imagination, but at the same time, I try to make it as plausible as possible. That's why I try to research the weapons that I talk about in the book and try to do as much research as I can so that it sounds like it could happen that way. It's probably a sobering thought, but it's a good thing to keep people on their toes, to realize that the world isn't all roses anymore. It's a situation where things can happen that could lead to a problem.
We love the technology. We love what we've done as a country in being a leader in technology, but other people have technology as well. Talk about the real life vulnerabilities that I know that you've studied and you've researched as you've worked in the book, The Cost of Liberty. Electromagnetic pulse. I mean, this is something that, as you said, and just to go back over it again, this basically could set us back a century or two. This really could lead to the demise of the country as we know it. Talk about how vulnerable we are as a country.
We are, and there are ways of protecting against that. There's been some people as recently as a few weeks ago. I heard Newt Gingrich talking on one of the TV networks that there's ways out there to protect the circuitry, especially the power grid and stuff, and make sure that this kind of thing couldn't occur. But it's expensive, and too often we use money for other things that don't have our safety in mind. Trying to get other things, other programs pushed through. Even things as simple as the International Space Station. Back in 2009, 2010, we got rid of our space shuttle program, so we rely on the Russians to take our astronauts back and forth to the space station. And in the book, that becomes a handicap because they take our astronauts hostages, and they threaten to execute them if we don't make an exchange of a prisoner that they want. So things like that could happen if we don't have any way of getting there, and we don't.
As I'm reading that, I'm thinking of that and watching the launches and the return being done in Russia, the United States paying these people to do this job for us. And I still shake my head, and I've had for a number of years, that just isn't right. And hopefully that part will change. But you're right, we're very vulnerable. They've got American lives over there, American technology that they're controlling. The book is called The Cost of Liberty. The author is Michael Skeen, our guest on the program. His website and blog is Michael Skeen, that's SKEEN.com. The book is available at Amazon. You can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and log on and get information there as well. The book starts in June of 2018. What's the United States like at the time? It's frightening, but give us a little description of where we are at that point in history.
Well, at June of 18, where it actually starts, we are under control. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains, you're under control of the Islamic State, because they have already invaded and taken over control. The book starts with the questioning of Don Ladner. He was the chief of staff, but he and the president got separated at the time of the attack on the White House, and he's been hiding out, and he's now been captured and being questioned in Washington, D.C., oddly enough, at an embassy there. And he's kind of, one of the things about the book is it kind of builds on the character of the two individuals.
Yes.
Don is trying to save himself. He wants to save the country too, but he's more interested in saving himself, and he's trying to convince himself it's all right to cooperate with the people who are holding him hostage. And TJ is trying to get closer to God and trying to let his faith lead him, but he's more interested in trying to stop all the stuff that's going on in the world, because while this is going on in the United States, Russia has invaded Europe, and China's invaded the Southeast Asia, and the Islamic State has invaded everything that they haven't already taken up. And it's all being coordinated by the Russian administration. And so it's kind of interesting the way that works. There's a little bit of the character that the strong man in Russia is Vladimir.
I love that, yes.
I don't know why I came up with that name.
Well, that's a stretch. That's a stretch.
Yeah. But at any rate, he's the person leading the charge and coordinating things, and he becomes a little bit of an egomaniac, and he starts wanting to control everything, and it shows how quickly things can deteriorate. Even his own allies start to turn against him by the end of the book. And I think there's a third book coming. I'm starting to work on it right now, but it takes me a while to write. And so it'll be interesting which way this goes when it's all said and done. But as you know, in this book, things look pretty bad for the United States. And even though we do fight back, it looks like we could be in some dire straits in the future.
A couple minutes left in the program. I would think that basically every day now, as you're watching a newscast, as you're listening to the radio, as you're picking up a newspaper, there have to be ideas there that maybe not like fleshed out at this point, but this is something that I really need to look into.
Oh yeah, no question about that. Especially since the election, there's such a division in this country. You kind of wonder what would happen if that division carried on, and what's going to draw the country back together again. And in my next book, we're going to have to find a way to draw the country back together again as well, because the country is very divided at the time, and there's a lot of people being patriotic and wanting to save the country from being controlled by somebody else, but at the same time, there's some people working against the country as well. And I think that you can see that every day when you listen to the news, that the same thing's going on right now. We have politicians that are more interested in what party they belong to, rather than what's best for the country. And that was kind of the basis for TJ running for president to begin with, was because politicians are more interested in their party and themselves than they are in the country.
As people read the book, do you want them to sort of take away, okay, this book has been entertaining, I've enjoyed reading this, it's a story, but do you want them also to think, maybe the next time I pick up a newspaper and read the headlines, I should take a closer look at events?
Yeah, that'd be a good idea, and I'd like them to start thinking about, especially when they go to vote, what it is that they're voting for. I mean, whether or not they're just voting because they're one party or the other and they're voting for that party, or
Yes.
if they're really voting for the right person who really cares about the country and wants to advance the country and safeguard it. Too often I see situations where the people who are in charge are not really interested in what's best for the country. It's what's going to keep them in office the longest, and what's going to pad their pocket. And and both sides are guilty of it. It's not just one party or the other. Both parties are guilty of it. So we need to find some new leadership that's going to do what's best for the country, even when it hurts a little bit. Because if we don't take a little bit of pain now, there's a lot of pain that could be waiting for us in the future.
The book is excellent. It's called The Cost of Liberty. It's the follow-up to The Cost of Freedom. Both books available, of course, at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual places for books. Information by the author Michael Skeen is available at his website, michaelskeen, skeen.com. And, of course, you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on to Michael's website and get all of the information. Michael, it was a fascinating read, a frightening read. I haven't slept in 3 days since I finished the book. Thank you for scaring me, because it's also plausible. It is so well done, and a book that really is must-reading, like I said, because it will open your eyes to all of these what-if scenarios. What if even a number of them fell into place? The book is called The Cost of Liberty, as I said, the follow-up to Cost of Freedom. Michael, thank you so much for being with us on the program.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You've got a very active mind, and I'm looking forward to number 3, and we'll get you back to talk about that. Michael Skeen, our guest on This Week in America. Information on his books available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Stay tuned. We're right back after these messages. This Week in America. Thanks for being with us.